Today's episode, we will be breaking down Venom: The Last Dance, the final film in the Venom trilogy in the Spider-Man villain arc universe by Sony Pictures. And unfortunately, that may be coming down under the wire to be a little disappointment, but all hopes for this episode, we are having a guest on breaking down this movie with me as well, David Thompson from the Direct Podcast and Cinema Spending. So sit back and enjoy the episode.
I scream, you scream for movies, and that's what we be doing.
What is good, movie fans? Welcome to I Screen, You Scream for number 4 movies. Danny Scamlaji returns with the host of this podcast. Hope you're watching and listening through YouTube. But anyways, before we get started, subscribe to the podcast, whatever you're listening on. Follow my social media platforms in the link description below for Twitter and TikTok, and my Letterboxd for more in-depth review purposes. But this has been a few days since the new film came out, but I had to bring in a little symbiote partner on this episode, and I've been wanting to have this guy for quite some time, and he is more than just the symbiote. He is the comic book guy of superheroes, so it is my honor to bring back the one and only great David Thompson for Direct Podcast and Cinema Spending Podcast. David, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Danny, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, Venom, man. We got another Venom movie. Sony just continues to pump these things out. They claim they're done. They claim it's the last dance, but we will see. Based on the performance we're going to get into later today, maybe it will be finally the last dance, the last hurrah for them. But always a pleasure talking about comic book movies, whether it's, good, bad, ugly, anything in between. 2024 has been a very weird year, very Sony-filled year for them, with a Joker here and a Deadpool there. But overall, I'm very excited for the 2025 slate because, quite frankly, I'm kind of sick of this 2024 slate.
Yeah, we all want to move on to 2025 and see where it's at. I mean, after Deadpool, yeah, there's a lot of question if superhero comic book fatigue is still in play when it comes to these quality movies. So, but Venom: The Last Dance, yes, is finally out. So this is the third and final film in the trilogy of Venom, and a lot to talk about. So I got to see this past Friday afternoon. You got to see like early, right? This past last week on Wednesday or something.
Yeah, it was Tuesday last week.
Tuesday. Okay, well, that's cool. So initially, let's give our quick thoughts before we delve into the topics. So David, as a guest, what did you think of The Last Dance overall?
I thought it was okay. I thought it was pretty much in line with the other films. Not to get into spoilers yet, but I felt like I didn't love the third act. I thought the third act was pretty nonsensical. And I thought a lot of the plot just from the opening was kind of nonsensical. And that's kind of that's oftentimes the case with these Venom movies. And a lot of people just accept that and enjoy it for what it is. But for me, I felt like in at least Let There Be Carnage and definitely in the first one. The first movie I think is almost in a way like underrated now because that movie is actually like a somewhat well-constructed film. And I feel like Let There Be Carnage and The Last Dance just simply are not well-constructed films at all. They're just thrown together with Tom Hardy and this Venom voice inside of his head. But with this one, I just felt like they didn't even really lean on their strengths too much. There was maybe too many of these like ancillary characters. I hated getting the background for some of them. It just felt very thrown together. And then also for me, I felt like we didn't get enough badass Venom moments where that's kind of why you show up to a film like this. Like Let There Be Carnage isn't a great movie, but the last 20 minutes of it are really entertaining in my opinion. Like them fighting in that church, Carnage and Venom, like it's kind of silly and they waste Carnage in many ways. He only gets, so much screen time, but it's at least like a fun flick to watch in a big screen. This one to me was overwhelming. It felt like kind of like throwing CGI out there just for the sake of CGI and just getting all these symbiotes together. But overall, like I was honestly expecting more from the film itself, from the box office. Like I kind of had higher hopes and it let me down, but it's not like it's anything too outside of what this franchise has already been.
So for me, it is what I expect, honestly. Nothing but pure entertainment is all I'm gonna say. I mean, you're gonna basically get Eddie and Venom romancing it up. And I like the third act because it's dumb. At the end of the day, I know it's nonsensical, or I think just the idea, and now we're not gonna spoil it, we're keeping it spoiler free, but I think the third act was just
Sure.
made up the entire movie. The first two acts is just nothing, and it's just a little not boring, but I'd say boring enough to you get the chemistry of these of Eddie and Venom, and then
Yeah.
the yeah, there's too much things to talk about, but I'm just giving my official thoughts. So it's just pure entertainment, and third act was just a blast. Everything else is lopsided. I mean, it's definitely, in my opinion, the weakest of the trilogy. I kind
Mhm.
of prefer the first two Venom movies way more for that. So yeah, we didn't get enough Venom moments. So I just
Yeah.
realized, been reminded in my head a couple times, and
They
it
worked it into the
wasn't.
plot. I mean, not to get too into it, but like they literally work into the plot how he's not going to be Venom so much this movie. And to me, it wasn't like, oh, what a clever story idea. It's like, all right, we're going to save a few bucks. We're not going to have Venom in the film as much. And we're going to try to make his moments a little bit more epic. But for me, it didn't really work out. I mean, one of Venom's longest sequences as fully Venom is the dance sequence.
Yeah, I was gonna say I
Genuinely.
like the dance scene. It's pretty
I mean,
fun
it
to
was
watch.
funny. Yes, it was funny getting Mrs. Chen in the movie just like out of nowhere, where it's like she shouldn't have been in the film at all because like this
Oh,
is
yeah.
not set in San Francisco. Um, but yeah, that was pretty funny. But I just felt like on the Venom aspect of it, like the actual like full look, because so much of this film it's just Tom Hardy with the floating head next to him, and like sure that can work here and there, and like yeah, it was kind of cool when he bounces around like on the horse and the fish. But by the way, they showed all of that in the trailer, so none of that was surprising at all. And honestly, like I think the best part of all of these movies, in my opinion, and it's not like this significant thing, it's the Venom um design. It's this it Venom, I think, looks great in these movies. Like I think he looks so much better than how he did in Spider-Man 3, for instance. Like he really is this great looking like CGI blob, genuinely. Like I think he actually has a really great design. And like because in a franchise like this, you're able to go from, one, two, three, you have the same graphic design VFX artists working on that year in, year out. And you can keep manipulating that and developing it and adding texture to it. So that's why we see so many characters like we saw with a great example is Thanos. Thanos only got better, better, better CGI wise. And that's not like people might be mistaken. That's not because we're getting into, we're developing like computer graphics in such like a major way. It's making everything look better because there's still so much shitty CGI. It's time. It really is time. That's why I like these Avatar movies, Time and Care. They look so great because they take their time. They put all
Yes,
the
James
care
Cameron,
in.
baby.
Yeah, they put all these. I mean, James Cameron, literally puts the graphic design, the special effects first, which is phenomenal, and it makes for like such an incredible visual experience. And then we get movies like a Madam Web, for instance, that just looks terrible.
Uh,
Like the movie itself is awful, but literally, like even the graphic design and all that is just like horrific, genuinely. So it's just a shame bringing it back to Venom here. It's a shame that for me, the number one best part about these movies to me is just the way Venom looks and can look in like a fight and action scene. And that was underutilized in this one compared to the first two, which is a surprise considering one of those first two is an origin story. So we don't even get Venom in that movie until later on. Um, so yeah, I definitely would consider myself a bit disappointed by this one, even though I will admit there definitely are some positives. It's not the worst. I mean, it's not as bad as Madam Web, or it's not the worst comic book movie I've seen this year, but it's certainly not great.
like you said about the Venom CGI thing, I mean, they kept getting better with this at first. I just noticed how the first one had like a
Mhm.
little step up of the CGI, and then the second one gets better. The third one seems really better. I mean, yeah, the way how his head flows, the way his body. I mean, yeah, this is like a step up improvement of the CGI. So that's like really great.
Yeah.
Um, so like I said, we're gonna talk about a little of the goods. There's not much goods in this, but Eddie and Venom's chemistry, bromancing through this movie. I mean, the first 2 acts, if you could just turn your brains off, you enjoy their actions. I mean, like I said, the side characters are very dull. I mean,
Yeah.
I wasn't really entertaining, but I mean, what's the actor's name? Like starts with a C. He plays Rex Strickland. I
Should we
could
tell
say
Eddie for?
yeah. He was pretty fine in that movie. I will admit he's cocky, but
Yeah.
I like his style at least. But Eddie and Venom's bromance. What do you think? Was it really the last dance
Um,
between these two?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that was more of the strength of the film. I did not like Juno Temple's character, who is the like doctor lady who has that whole like ridiculous origin story with the lightning and stuff. And I'm like,
Didn't bother me either.
oh my gosh, can we please not do this right now? Like I almost wanted to let out a sigh or a groan when it cuts to this like flashback of these kids. And like normally I like flashback scenes to add context to film and TV shows. This in this case, I'm just like, please no. Like I don't Sony is so and I mean it's very blanket statement. Sony Spider-Man spin-off films are so just like lazy and just kind of like they think what you should do is give backstory. Fine, that's great. Add character depth. But they do it in such a clunky, like lazy way to me. It's like, you know what? Make this character good? Nah, whatever. Let's just throw in this like ridiculous flashback sequence when it just so happens the day that her brother dies from a lightning strike. Two things. One, he tells her all about his like life goal about like being an astronaut and like shooting for the stars and all of this. And two, she's affected by the lightning bolt, doesn't die. So then later in the film, when something happens when she gets the symbiote, it makes a little bit more sense. She's looking like Sonic and Knuckles out there. But yeah, anyway, that was ridiculous to me. I will say on the positives though, like yeah, Tom Hardy is great. I love him a lot. Just in
Great.
general. Him as Eddie Brock is kind of whatever to me, but I do enjoy his he just makes it his own. It really is just Tom Hardy and Venom to me.
His own accent. Pretty funny.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's good. And they really didn't rely, you can kind of tell like they shot this movie a lot like kind of outside or like on sets. There weren't these like huge like city moments, right? Like they had the final fight being in this kind of like desert area. All these things you can kind of like put together, that they're cutting some costs, right? Like if you're not fighting in New York City or in San Francisco or in this huge like steeple, might be a little bit easier to save some money. It might be easier to shoot a film that way when it's just a desert. Okay, right? I can find a desert anywhere, and
it only cost $120 million. That's a little increase from the previous two films. And
right.
It's not
And
bad, honestly.
Sony does a great job. That's the one thing they do best in terms of, the business of it all is they've been able to save a lot on these films. And normally, I mean, especially Venom 1 set up all of this and kind of really, I think Sony learned all the wrong lessons from Venom 1. But Venom 1 set all this up where it was lower budget and absolutely annihilated it at the box office. And now that's, led to all these other spinoffs and things like that. But back to The Last Dance. Yeah. So my general positives, just kind of to wrap that up, would have been, they're, obviously Tom Hardy, Venom, the Eddie Brock of it all. That stuff I thought was pretty well done. And it was entertaining. Like the main reason I would call that a positive for me is because when it shifted back to like the, Area 55, the under
51.
Area 51 place or whatever, like the science lab essentially. I that's when I was really bored. I was like, oh man, like I don't, I don't care about this. The guy that's supposed to be Toxin. I'm like, man, I do not care. Like there's so much like kind of just obvious exposition too, where the overly explaining stuff like the codex and things like this. Where I'm like, holy shit, like we just heard about this. I don't need to hear this again or learn about this again. But there was fun to be had in action sequences and with just Tom Hardy having a good time with the Venom inner voice. And I even liked the whole like family van thing, the hippies, right? That were interested in the
hippies were not interesting to me, honestly.
Yeah.
They just were boring. I just didn't like this is what I mean. The first two acts with them in that movie, I was not entertained with these people. I mean, I didn't care. I just wanted to see the fun out of this. But yeah,
Right.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's about it. I mean, I've pretty much
Oh,
gone
okay.
through like my negatives, which is like most of the movie. Looking back, especially like it hasn't aged well in my head either. Like in the moment, I went in with, I'm a big Spider-Man fan. I like Venom. I wanted to like this film, and it was disappointing to me how epilogue feeling this felt to me, where it didn't feel like this fundamental huge next chapter. To me it really felt like, oh, find out what happens in the next week after Let There Be Carnage, right? Like it just didn't have that, like,
Yeah.
they're calling it the last dance and stuff like this. It didn't have that any kind of an epic feel to me, even with introducing Null, which is supposed to be the
Yeah.
the reason of the reason you do that is to have an epic feel and to feel like you're raising the stakes. But it just did not work for me.
Yeah, the Noel part, like, we can talk about Noel real quick, but
Mhm.
played by the great Andy Serkis. I mean, who could have thought? And he's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love Andy Serkis whenever he plays these kind of roles, but he was underutilized, and I didn't even like appreciate the stakes they were going for. It just didn't feel real, All he's been doing in this movie, I mean, I'm not gonna say it, but just didn't been used right in the movie. That's all I'm gonna say. I just
Sitting
wish
on
they
a
could have
chair.
used him. Yeah, he's sitting on his ass. He's sitting his ass in that goddamn chair all freaking movie, and it's like, really, you're gonna sit on your ass all day? Oh, I get it. They're trying to get the key to unlock the codex, right? The codex. So that's what they're trying to get his army to do so. And I mean, interesting about his own creation that banished him. I mean, I get the idea there too. So just sat in
Nah.
his chair and then did nothing. I mean, there could have been something else. And then, yeah, I mean, I feel like it was just not purely high stakeable or like entertainment of that. So, I mean, that was just a thing that was missing to and the villain part arc is just like not strong enough. That's all I'm gonna say. It wasn't just great. So
Yeah.
when Noel got revealed in the second trial, I'm like, oh, this character. I never heard of this character, and I look him up, and I'm like, okay. So,
I
and
mean, he's an
then yeah,
important character, but he just
yeah,
wasn't
exactly.
utilized well. Yeah.
Man, I just don't know what they're doing with this. So yeah, that's really unfortunate. I really they could have used him in such next chapter way, like you said. I mean, this could have been just really, really, really exciting. Like who knows what this
Yeah.
character could have done. Um, anything else? Because I think that's everything of the pure entertainment of this movie. Like it's definitely the weakest. Like it's the weakest to you in the trilogy, right? Like by far the weakest.
I think so. I don't really want to go back and rewatch them, but I think it is. I was really surprised after watching the movie to see how some people put out online that this is the best of the
I didn't believe
series so
that
far.
shit, man. I didn't believe that.
Yeah, I mean, I know people who saw it and said that, and I want to kind of ask them, be like, why do you think that? Because I don't know what about this movie makes it better than at least the first one. I think maybe you can make an argument for Let There Be Carnage. Let There Be Carnage is kind of like you want to talk about like a partial movie. That movie is like it's only like an hour and 28 minutes or something
40 minutes. Yeah, yeah,
it's something
without the
crazy like
credits.
that. Like it flies by. You sit down and it's a whirlwind. You waste Carnage in terms of like the actual like what that character is supposed to be. Woody Harrelson's cool and stuff like that. But that was more of like almost like part of a movie. This one at least has like more to it, which might not actually help it. But yeah, I think certainly in my head, thinking back, Venom 1 is a better movie. Because that like I kind of think I mentioned earlier, like Venom 1 actually has it's a legit origin story. It's got legit characters they actually kind of like build from the ground up a little bit. Eddie Brock is still a journalist at the time. They completely just moved away from that aspect of his character. Like that's the thing with this film, in these movies in general. Like first they actually tried to kind of do the Eddie Brock thing, and then they quickly just kind of went away from that. It's like it's Tom Hardy with Venom, and that's where it kind of loses me a little bit. So yeah, if I had to, I would definitely say the first one is the best, and then I'd have to think through if I think Last Dance or Let There Be Carnage is up next. Even though personally, I think my favorite aspect of those second two movies, the winner would be the last 15, 20 minutes of Let There Be Carnage because I really enjoyed that fight sequence.
Yeah, I think this Let There Be Carnage is my favorite overall because it's more entertainingly fun, and getting the whole matchup
A
fight
wild
between
ride.
A
Yeah.
wild ride, Venom and Carnage. They were like the biggest matchups. We didn't get that till the
Mm-hmm.
third act, but it was a blast. I enjoyed that aspect, and
And Woody Harrelson's awesome. Gotta love
he's
Woody
awesome.
Harrelson.
Michelle Williams was also fire too, but not surprised. I'm surprised she didn't return in this one, but I get it. I think that's what they're setting to, so they're moving on from this character, and I get it.
Mm.
So there was no callback to it whatsoever. Wasn't surprising. And yeah,
I thought it
look,
was weak writing.
the first Venom was also awesome too. I mean, I think a couple of my friends I know would prefer the first Venom, and I get it. So
Yeah.
I think the problem is it's just they're going into more silly tone with it, and I think that's what they're really screwing up on. I mean, that's what displeases some people, and I get it. I mean, Venom's a serious character, and I get it, but I like the idea they went into this kind of silly tone and just went fun with it. That's what I like the previous Venom film, Let There Be Carnage,
Mhm.
for some reason. But I get it. So it's subjective, but it's all good. Um, for the rating, I would give it a 6 out of 10. Pure entertainment. Saying if anyone could sit through the first two acts, enjoy the bromance, and the third act, you'll find a little spark, but it's not the greatest you can ever find it. And then my star rating is like 3 out of 10, 5. What about your
Yeah.
rating?
Yeah, if I was doing like out of like stars, I would maybe go like 2.5. Maybe 3. Probably 2.5 though. I can't say I'd recommend the movie.
Yeah, me too. So real quick on numbers, and it's not gonna take too long, but
Sure.
so Venom: Last Dance, an unexpected way, which we all thought this was gonna do justice because the previous films were well liked to audiences, and they were giant hits because of this character.
Yeah.
But it's not surprising that this projections and the pre-sales went down, and it's pretty. I can't say harsh, but it's surprising because I mean, the previous two Venom movies, I mean, the first Venom made $80 million. The second one increased to $90 million. And we all thought this will go over 100 a little bit. And, but this
Big
really
hits.
stink.
Yeah.
Yeah, 40% drop. So this opening weekend of Venom at the moment before actuals come out or something made
Mhm.
$51 million opening weekend. And I predicted 79 because the projections were going lower. And what number did you predict on, David?
82. I was
82.
very
Oh,
high on it.
82. Yeah, God, 82. I went 79, and then yeah. And I think Pat went up to 105 million. And then it was like, yeah, I could see that happening before if the projections and pre-sales were great. And walk-ups happened too. So it wasn't for the walk-ups. This could have been done way lower, but the walk-ups really helped for this movie a bit to save it. So, but yeah, $51 million. I can't say it's the worst. It's definitely an underperformer, but overseas, I mean, look at the overseas numbers. It's doing way more gigantic because I think people love Venom outside this country and it's
Totally.
like refillable.
It
So,
does
what did you
really
think of this
great.
domestic opening of this movie?
Yeah, domestically, definitely a disappointment for me. It didn't completely bottom out. I wouldn't say it's like completely flopping. I just think that personally, like I mentioned, the 82 million projection, I was kind of high on it. I was baking in some of that general Venom interest. I mean, 80 million, 90 million, like you already mentioned, going all the way down to 51, I didn't think was possible. But here we are. And I think it's a testament to a few things. The word of mouth wasn't too negative coming directly out of it. Like I mentioned, there was some positive, but then more critical reviews came out and doesn't look awesome. And I'm just not sure that many people, in terms of who it's marketed to, were dying to see the movie. I think here's the thing. Venom 1 was a massive success, partly because people liked the movie somewhat, but also because it was something new and interesting. And Venom is a huge character, and Tom Hardy's a big star. Let There Be Carnage benefited a lot domestically because it opened 2 months before No Way Home. And
Yes.
right before that movie came out, everyone got word that there could be a post-credit scene that connects to No Way Home. At the moment, everyone and their brother was dying to see anything Spider-Man No Way Home because we had very little marketing. They were trying to keep a lid on all the secrets that were going to come out in that movie. And I think Let There Be Carnage, Sony really benefited from that, even though there wasn't really any connection besides that post-credits scene. I think that helped a lot box office wise. And then we saw what No Way Home ended up doing and kind of like the explosion that was. So with The Last Dance, I feel like it didn't really have anything new and exciting besides it being the quote unquote last chapter to draw people in a big way. You know, it's like, okay, there's this null character who's set up for the future, but we don't know how or why. Like, we don't, and after this movie, I don't know if that's even going to happen, right? Because, like, are we really going to use him in a Spider-Man movie? Are there even going to be any more of these Sony spin-off films? Craven comes out in December, but other than that, Sony hasn't announced any other Marvel movies coming out in any kind of pre-production stage. So to me, I feel like the franchise is dying. And honestly, I hope that Sony learns a bit of a lesson in terms of this movie, Madam Web, Craven, just in general. The 2024 Sony Marvel slate, if it's all underwhelming, they should understand why. And I think give even more power to Disney with their characters. Like, Sony does not have to keep doing this. They really, I mean, they genuinely don't. Because, like, quite frankly, it's pissing off a lot of fans. At least, like, for me, like, I'm a huge Spider-Man guy. And, like, pretty much anytime they put on a movie, I just go in hoping it's okay, but just, like, cringing at the fact that it even exists, which is just, like, not what they want. You know, they want the exact opposite. They want it to be, like, someone like me who loves the comic books getting excited, and I'm just not there. And that is what I think is translating right now. It's The Last Dance. It doesn't feel big and fundamental in this huge event, right? We kind of now, there are these movie events that happen these days, and Venom: The Last Dance just is not one of those.
I was gonna bring up the fact Sony didn't really buzz this movie. Like, you know, they buzzed this pretty great with Let There Be Carnage, like you said, and it was a giant opening weekend. But the
Yeah.
fact is, this buzz wasn't strong enough, and Sony didn't really had confidence with Let The Last Dance. They knew they shit this bed. That's probably why the underperformance was there. And of course, Morbius, Madam Web, they were the stinkers of the Sony Spider-Man villain movies, and that's what dropped this underperformance. So I can see why, and that's already been explained and done. So, you know, Sony obviously should learn a lot of this and just drop it. They should, I mean, yeah, drop it in a sense that once Craven's out this December, which I don't think it's going to do mighty good because no one cares. I don't sense anyone likes or cares about Craven. Doesn't set up to anything huge. It's just going to be just a standalone Craven movie, and that's it. I mean, that will be one and done.
Yeah,
So,
it's gonna be I think that movie's gonna be,
but it's
expectations should be low.
R-rated,
It's
so
R-rated.
R-rated, so
I
that's
feel like it's
finally
not
giving
even,
people what they want.
I suppose. I don't think that movie even should be compared to something like a Venom though, because I feel like because of the R rating, because of the character itself, and just kind of like seemingly the tone of the movie, I don't think it's really going to be one of those films that a lot of people go out and see. Like, I think it's going to be a very kind of like smaller niche comic book film. So expectations, I think, for that one should definitely be tempered, and I'm sure they are at Sony. They've moved this release date around like 3 times, and finally landed on December 2024 for no apparent reason. And I just have no faith in that movie being good or, you know, making any money at all.
Yeah, it's gonna get swallowed up by the next following films the following week after that because, you know, it's probably gonna be doomed for it. But it's gonna just actually, I don't know. I think, yeah, definitely. I think it's gonna be swallowed up for the following holiday movies coming out as well. So, I mean, even if the buzz is, even if Sony if Sony cares about this movie and buzzes this movie to be this good, and it's actually good. I mean, I don't know how this is gonna explode, but I just don't see any late faith or any bullish on this film, regardless. So I don't see Craven as being a giant hit. Even the budget is also fair as well. It's like $130 million for the last time I checked. So I don't
Yeah.
think even that. I don't know how much people appeal to Craven. That's it.
I agree.
Um, just in general, let's talk about one last thing. The superhero overall this year has been not great. I mean, look, we had Madam Web, we had Joker. Oh my god! And last episode, I had wannabe OC VP intern Christopher, who just got promoted from the VO Boys. Him and I break down the collapse of box Joker Foley 2 at the box office and the
Yeah.
review. So check that out if you guys haven't. Huge episode. And Venom, look, I don't know what the second weekend's gonna be like, And I'll be honest, I think it's got to be my cinema score. That's really not good. I think the drop is going to be very big on this for the first time in my eyes. I think for a Venom movie, like it
Hmm.
dropped. I can't remember what the last one dropped around the percent, but all I'm saying is it's going to be dropping very bad. And I think the legs for this domestically is going to be weaker, but I think overseas is going to carry this movie a lot.
Definitely.
What's your percent drop prediction? I'm going 60. I'm gonna go 66 on this. Drop's
Yeah.
pretty big.
Yeah, I'd agree. I was gonna say like 65. I feel like, yeah, in the 60s sounds about right. There isn't a ton of big name competition next week, so that could favor it a bit. I just am not sure based on, you mentioned the cinema score and just general anecdotal feelings towards the film. I'm not sure everyone's racing out to see it. Like literally, I took one of my friends to go see the movie when we went last week, and someone when we were leaving the area we were in, like the security guy was like, "Hey, like, do you guys see Venom?" And we were like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Would you recommend it? Like, if it was at full price?" And we're like, "No." So I feel like that kind of, and we're no way we're the only ones kind of saying that. So
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend this a lot either. So I just when people ask me about what do you think of Venom 3, and I'm like, entertaining, but it's not the best. I just said short and sweet without giving too much context. So I just
yeah,
definitely not recommend this movie at all.
yeah,
I
they're
just
silly
knew
fun to be had. Yeah,
I just knew it
popcorn.
wasn't gigantic when I went closer to the release. Even though I was excited for Venom more than Joker Folie do for some reason, but
Mm,
I wasn't surprised.
yeah.
That just wasn't the high stakes.
Hmm.
Well, David, is there anything else you want to bring up before we wrap this up? Because it's been an honor. It's an honor to have you on this again, as always. So and everybody, always subscribe to the podcast, I Screen, You Screen 4 movies. But David, where can the listeners and audiences find you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm at David Thompson with 2 A's on Twitter. Um, the Direct Podcast. We have a lot going on right now. We have, oh my goodness, this week's going to be crazy because Monday, today, October 20, what are we at? October
The
28th.
28th
Um,
today.
yeah, we have news rundown, Penguin review. We're gonna get a Venom review up at some point, probably tomorrow on Tuesday, and then Halloween. Very exciting. The Agatha All Along finale happens. The 2-part finale happens Wednesday night. Thursday, we're doing our review for that. So yeah, subscribe to the Direct Podcast, the Direct Extras YouTube page, all those things, thedirect.com. Obviously, you can find some of my writing work and things like that. But yeah, thanks, Danny. I really appreciate it. It's
What
been a
about the
lot of fun.
Cinema Spending podcast? Anything else going on over
Si-
there? Because
yeah,
I love listening to your show for that for some reason a lot.
yeah, thanks. Cinema Sending. Pretty much my like kind of how would I put it? Kind of like my rule for myself for cinema spending is because that's not really part of like my greater job or anything. I post on there when I want to, essentially. Like when I have something to say
No rush.
that I can't. When I have something to say that kind of takes like just myself or maybe just like a very specific podcast or box office guess, that's when I post on there. So it's been a little while. I feel like there's been so much great coverage. You talked about the BO boys. They do such a phenomenal job covering all this box office stuff. But yeah, cinema spending, that's on, Apple and Spotify and all that good stuff. And we'll be posting up there probably in the next couple months. Definitely an episode before the end of the year.
All right, sounds good. I can't wait. And everybody, if you enjoyed this series of I Screen, You Screen 4 movies, subscribe whatever you're listening on. If you are listening to the podcast, you're not getting the whole story. You gotta subscribe to the YouTube right now, right here, right now. You'll get to see my face, David's face. I keep doing this every time, but I'll keep reminding you guys this shadow poster for Sonic 3. I'm still excited. I'm still buzzing on this film. We're 2 months over this movie, and I'm excited as hell. So let's go. Social media platforms, Twitter, TikTok, Twitter X, TikTok are available in the show notes for. Excuse me. Twitter and TikTok is why you gotta follow there, and my Letterboxd is in the show notes, available for more movie review in-depth purposes. And just before we end this off, there won't be any episode in a minute because I'm excited for 2 phenomenons coming out late November. You have Wicked and Gladiator 2. And David,
Yep.
how buzzy are you with these phenomenons, or should I say Glicked? Wicked later, something like that. But it's huge. I'm excited for these two movies. I've been loving this stuff like this for Barbenheimer, whatever it's not the real thing or not, is so exciting. I'm like really appealed to this already. So what do you think?
Yeah, no, I am very bullish on both the openings of both of those movies. Moana coming as well. And yeah, I mean, I feel like that's going to be a huge factor this next month because so many people are going to be waiting to head to the cinema until the end of November because there is just so much good stuff. I mean, I definitely want to see all three of those movies, Wicked, Gladiator 2, and Moana, as soon as I possibly can. So yeah, it's gonna be a huge end of November at the box office. That's for sure.
I can't wait. So Wicked and Gladiator are my 2X episode reviews on the show, guys. So until then, subscribe then. And that will be it, guys. So thanks for tuning in. But until then, this is Danny Scamlaji signing off of iScreen. You scream for number 4 movies. Stay screaming for the movies. And I'll see you guys in the next review. Peace.